Explain like I'm 5. Why is Philippines spelled with PH, but Filipino is spelled with a F? As the title says, I googled it and didn't quite understand, so here I am. Make it make sense, please. Philip is a name of Greek origin which starts with a phi. Some languages keep the PH spelling as a nod to the Greek origin of the word. Some languages change the spelling to F, such as Felipe, to match the phonetic rules of the local language. Sometimes, since it's a proper noun, the rules can be applied inconsistently. That appears to be what has happened here. As an added twist, the native language of the Philippines, Tagalog, does not have the F sound. Here's a 10-year-old thread from this sub asking the same question, and the top comment indicates that the Philippine alphabet was modified in 1987 to include the F letter sound, hence the change to Filipino. And r/explain like I'm 5 is about 12 years old, Jesus. And after 12 years, we still have to explain everything to it like it's 5? It's due to historical transliterations. Just like we call him King Philip of Spain and not Felipe, or Catherine the Great instead of Ekaterina the Great. The real question is, why aren't they called Filipinos in English instead of Filipinos? Early texts in America would use both, but the Spanish Filipino spelling won out. The Philippine Islands, the Philippines, English. Las Islas Filipinas, Filipinas, Spanish. The Spanish name is Filipinas, where Filipinos come from. Tagalog is Pilipinas. English is Philippines. Explain like I'm 5. What is powering the Voyager 1? It has been traveling in the space for almost 50 years. Relevant power orbs? Is there a subject ever discussed on this site that doesn't have a relevant XKCD comic? It's crazy how prolific they are. Occasionally, yes. Some subjects are too complicated for stick figure comics to cover, so I instead have to find a what if I want to link XKCD. I've even come across a few posts where I had to reference one of the book-only what ifs. If you're referring to what's powering the scientific equipment on board, an RTG, it's a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Thermocouples convert heat into electrical energy, and the heat comes from the decay of a chunk of radioactive material. Energy output gradually decreases over time as the material decays, so individual components are progressively shut down to reduce total system energy consumption. If you're referring to how it's still traveling at immense speed, inertia, and a practical lack of resistance due to the vacuum of space, just thought I would add that Voyager uses the MHW RTG model in particular, which employs the isotope plutonium-238, which has a half-life of 87.7 years. Voyager both have 1977 474 watts total, i.e. at launch via 3 RTG 158 watts. SIA 2022 230 watts total. Figures are all power available in watts electric, not watts thermal. Via NASA radioisotope power systems. Each probe is equipped with 3 RPS called multi-100-watt MU radioisotope thermoelectric generators, RTGs. Each MHW RTG generated an output of 158 watts electric at the beginning of mission, offering Voyager about 474 watts of electricity to power its science payload. The RTGs convert heat from the natural decay of plutonium oxide into usable power to power the spacecraft. The excess heat is used to warm the instrumentation, enabling them to work in the coldness of space. This production decreases over time, as the radioisotope reaches its half-life of 87 years. The Voyager team has strategically turned off non-essential systems to extend the life of the mission as much as possible. 45 years later, the RTGs are producing about 230 watts of electricity, and the spacecraft is still providing valuable science returns from interstellar space. The spacecraft will continue to use the heat and power from the RTG until the output diminishes too much to support the instruments and critical systems. The radioisotope power system, RPS, used by Voyager 1 have enabled the spacecraft to explore some of the most distant destinations in our solar system, and it was the first to begin exploring interstellar space. With over 60 years of successful use in the United States, RPS will continue to provide NASA the power to explore our solar system and beyond. Explain like I'm 5. Why do larger engines get less MPG? Couldn't a V8 be geared to a lower RPM and consume the same or less than an i4 at a given speed? I imagine some of the difference is due to weight, larger engines being in trucks, or performance. Sports cars made to accelerate rather than cruise well, but it seems that almost without fail, the bigger the engine, the less MPG. I don't understand where the extra energy goes, if not to the wheels. To some extent you can, but either way, you're carrying around all that extra engine. If you took a fuel-efficient car and put 500 pounds of unused engine in the trunk, you're going to get worse fuel efficiency. Assuming all other variables were the same, and you were on a flat road, it wouldn't make much of a difference. In the real world, it probably wouldn't even be measurable. Besides that, there isn't that big of a weight penalty between engines. For example, I'd guess that a K24 and an LS1 have less than 100 pounds between them. The real difference isn't the static weight of the engine, but the rotating mass of it, and the associated increases in friction. Real world also isn't a flat, straight highway. Every time you need to speed up from a stop or go up a hill, that extra weight takes more fuel. The other thing is, it's much easier to use a bunch more fuel accelerating with the V8 than with a smaller engine. So it is harder to drive efficiently with a powerful engine than with a smaller engine. There's some parts nobody has touched on yet that I'll try to explain simply. 1. Pumping losses. It takes energy to suck the air and fuel into the cylinder, energy to compress the piston, and energy to push to exhaust air out. A larger displacement engine has to push more air per revolution, and a larger engine with more cylinders will have more internal surface area that creates drag and friction. Fuel burn. The faster the air enters the cylinder, it has more energy, and mixed with the atomized fuel, better. This results in a more efficient burn. There is a point where this turned to a hindrance, but that's usually well above typical car engine RPM. A small engine turning faster will be flowing more air, allowing for better air velocity. If you want to see the results of this yourself, look for an engine efficiency map. This diagram shows where engines operate most efficiently, efficiency measured as most work done per fuel. Engines are most efficient under load and around their peak torque value, usually around the middle of the RPM range. This efficiency doesn't mean it uses the least fuel, it just uses the fuel most efficiently. If you're buying, say, a generator, it will run at this efficiency point to maximize energy produced per liter of fuel. To better take advantage of this principle for cars, the best way would be to use a small engine to charge a battery and then drive the wheels with electric motors. Most car engines only use their advertised power when accelerating hard, e.g., passing on the highway, climbing a steep hill, and spend most of their life only needing a small fraction of their advertised power. For most driving, you could get away with a small 40 horsepower engine at peak efficiency to charge a battery, and then use, say, 300 horsepower electric motor that can cruise at 40 horsepower without the inefficiency of an engine, but still put power down from the battery reserves when it's needed in rare occasions. Unfortunately, this is the most complex type of car layout, which is why it's not frequently used. It has all the complexity of ICE, plus all the complexity of an EV, and typically desired by very price-conscious buyers looking for maximum fuel economy. Let's assume the V8 is essentially two i4 strapped together. They have the same stroke and bore, and all the internal components require the same force to move. Both engines require some fuel to push the pistons, and that force is generated by detonating fuel. For each power cycle of the engine, the i4 will detonate fuel in 4 cylinders. The V8 will detonate fuel in 8 cylinders. It won't be double the fuel, since each cylinder is doing less work, but it will be more fuel than the i4. Someone else mentioned cylinder deactivation, where the V8 only detonates fuel in 4 cylinders. In this case, the other 4 cylinders have weight and friction that must be overcome, so the V8 will still need to use more fuel than the equivalent i4. Slight nitpick. Common automotive engines are 4-stroke, not 2-stroke. Therefore, the i4 fires twice per revolution, while the V8 fired 4 times per revolution. Each piston goes suck, squeeze, bang, blow, using 1 revolution of the crankshaft to ingest a charge of air and fuel, then compress it. In the next revolution, the fuel ignites and forces the piston down, that's the power stroke, and then the piston going back up pushes the exhaust out. Engines aren't particularly efficient. Gas escapes around the piston rings, heat escapes into the cylinder walls, friction in every sliding part. These losses are part of the engine, and if it is running, then it is wasting. A bigger engine has bigger losses. Some of these inefficiencies also get worse at low RPM, while others get worse at low pressure. So no matter what, if your engine is running at a power level outside of the sweet spot it was designed for, it's going to be wasteful. And the farther it is from the sweet spot, the more wasteful. Explain like I'm 5. How did ancient civilizations make furnaces hot enough to melt metals like copper or iron with just charcoal, wood, coal, clay, dirt, and stone? A simple clay brick furnace with a bellows attached to a tuyere can get hot enough to melt, or at least soften, iron to be shaped or poured into a mold. Primitive Technology on YouTube has a few experiments with iron bacteria. One of my favorite YouTube channels. I always get excited to see what he's done now when a new video drops. Always remember to turn on subtitles, he explains everything going on in them. Especially with copper and tin, you don't need to get it super hot, relatively speaking, in order to melt it. Pile up some dirt and stone to make a cylinder, put some wood inside the furnace you just made, dump your copper and tin inside to cook, and then put a pot of water on top for a bit of tea. Optional. A regular cooking oven used to bake bread gets to 400 F. Copper needs about 2000 F to melt, hotter than your bread oven, but relatively speaking, not super hot. Iron is significantly harder than copper, needing about 2800 F to melt, almost 50% hotter. But once people had been making bronze for a while, iron was basically the same principles at work. Regular wood fires, without any special effort, can get as hot as about 2750 F, give or take a bit. So copper is well within the range of just throw more wood on it, while iron is just barely at the top end of the range of what a wood fire can melt. 400 F is 2 and 4 C, 2000 F is 1293 C, 2750 F is 1510 C, 2800 F is 1537 C, 400 grams cornstarch, 200 grams flour, 200 grams powdered sugar, 200 grams baking powder. Mix those with just enough water to combine. They'll turn into a dense dough. Take a soup can or coffee tin, smush the dough evenly around the inside so all sides are covered. Drill a hole in the side. Congrats, you now have a forge that can hit temps of 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. The dough mixture, because a hyper-insulating carbon shield. It's not hard to make things super hot when you know what you're doing. Ancient people weren't stupid, they just didn't have the internet. Well, that's another episode of Explain Like I'm 5 in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.